Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar, COVID-19 series, the Foundation CEO panel. My name is Tiffany Dean. I'm the Senior Director for Foundations, and I just want to make a couple of quick comments before we get started. You'll see how to ask questions and listen in during this webinar. You can dial in either with your phone if that sound works better, or use your computer sound. If at any point you want to ask a question of the panelists, and we encourage you to do so, that is in the chat box along in the menu on the right-hand side. And I'm very pleased now to turn the microphone over to our esteemed moderator, George Watt, who's one of our senior fellows here at AGB, and he'll introduce himself and our speakers to discuss this important topic. George?
Well, thank you, Tiffany, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. I want to especially thank AGB for making this webinar series possible and giving all of us an opportunity to again convene and to share and to learn. Speaking of convening, the last time I was together with these 4 colleagues of mine and with many of you who are on the call was 4 months ago today. We were in San Diego. We were wrapping up the AGB Foundation Forum, and the theme there was Now Next. We closed on Tuesday, January 28th, hearing from Michael Horn regarding the power and inspiration of innovation, and then went our separate ways. The now we are experiencing in late May is not the now we anticipated back then. The tangible cost and the incredible human toll of the COVID-19 virus have been enormous thus far. Our next is still to be determined. In fact, you might say we are navigating in a sea of ambiguity, and I would argue these are very rough seas. If so, it's not so important to dwell on where we've been, but it's very important to get a sense of where we are and a clear sense of our destination and a path to get there. With that, I'd like to begin the dialogue with my colleagues, and they will share more about where their respective foundations are and where they anticipate going in the near and intermediate future. As Tiffany mentioned, we also look forward to taking questions from our viewers and listeners. My colleagues' bios were already made available in the webinar announcement. I assure you, each one is a veteran foundation, CEO, executive director, and considered leaders in our profession and throughout the IRF sector. And although they may represent completely different institutions from 4 different regions of the country, you'll find their and your foundations have much in common, to include supporting the mission and cause of our respective institutions. So I've asked each of them to begin with giving all of you a sense of their foundation as it relates to their respective institution. And we're going to begin with Vita Pickram from Delaware State Foundation. Thank you, Vita.
Hello, thank you all for attending today. So Delaware State University's foundation was founded in 2006, so we're relatively young as a foundation. The university is 129 years old, and next year, May 15th, we'll be celebrating 130 years. So we're excited about that. Our endowment is a little over 30 million, at this point. And let's see, we have 640 acres, 4 colleges, 2 farms, and our student population is just broke over 5,000 students. So we're very excited about that. We have a new president, Dr. Tony Allen, and a board chair, Dr. Devonna Williams. And so we feel that we're in a good position to share information about how we're succeeding through the COVID-19.
Thank you, Vita. Great introduction. Elizabeth, would you like to go next?
Be happy to. Make sure I'm not muted. I've been in the same role at the Wichita State University Foundation for almost 29 years. I am part of a foundation that is fully independent. We only receive 1% of our budget from the university, and I'm an officer and board member for the foundation, but I also serve as a member of the president's executive team, and our university is about 15,000 students. Our foundation is responsible for both asset management and all fundraising. We're completely centralized with our fundraising. And we are in the process of merging with our alumni association. So we are going through that very soon. This next year, we will be looking at how to conduct that merger with our alumni association. Total managed assets of $370 million, of which 3/4 are under our own pooled investments. Our budget is $5.3 million. We have 46 full-time staff members plus students. And I'm thrilled to say that on a $250 million Shock the World campaign, our mascots, the Shockers, we are concluding June 30th, but as of today, we are at $307 million. So we are one of the fortunate ones to be wrapping up a campaign right now as we look for the future.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Now from Boulder, Colorado, Jack Finlow.
Good morning. The CU Foundation is about 50 years old, and we support all 4 of the University of Colorado's campuses, Boulder, Denver, Colorado Springs, and our Anschutz Medical Campus. And the foundation has about $2 billion of assets under management, of which about $1.5 billion is our CU endowments. We work closely with our advancement professionals, but they are at the university, they're university employees, and all of the fundraising strategy and goals are set at the 4 campuses. And we're near completion, I hope, of our $4 billion campaign. We've raised about $3 billion at this point. And we see, despite the COVID disruptions, pretty robust fundraising occurring across all 4 of our campuses.
Thanks a lot, Jack. Congratulations to you and Elizabeth on your campaigns, by the way. Tom Mitchell, Gainesville, Florida.
Yes, George, thank you. And thanks everyone for being with us today to share some thoughts and ideas. I'm finishing my 10th year at the University of Florida as Vice President of Advancement and Executive VP for the University of Florida Foundation. So I wear 2 hats. I serve on the President's Cabinet on the university side, and there are 12 cabinet members. And then I support our executive board on our foundation side. We have 20 members of our foundation group. We have a large team of people, of advancement professionals across the campus. We have 417 full-time FTEs. And so it's a big operation, it's a mature operation, and in a big campaign, and working closely with the university and our board and many stakeholders across the state of Florida and around the world to think about where we're at today and where do we go next. So George, thanks so much for the invitation, and I look forward to our discussions.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for a segue. When you say stakeholders, one of the areas of interest that our viewers sent in that they want to talk about is regarding expectation setting among our many constituents. And you think about those constituents and stakeholders, deans, faculty writ large, students, donors, alumni, institution, cabinet, the other, if you have another board that you have to deal with on campus, etc. I thought maybe we could start with the institution itself and talk a little bit about expectation setting, knowing the institution is also under some financial duress, declining enrollment, some questions about enrollment in the fall, among many, many other unanswered questions in this sea of ambiguity. And Tom, since you teed it up, why don't we just stick with you for a moment? Talk to us a little bit about setting the expectations with maybe the largest constituent you have, and that's the university itself.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time, as you might imagine, with our university leaders and our deans and our development officers and their respective boards. And I would say over the last 2 months, we've been in regular contact with them. We actually put together a new executive communication strategy to carry messages and to be sure that we're hearing from those constituents what priorities are now evolving for them. What used to be a priority 6 months ago maybe is not a priority today. how do we shift our team? How do you develop your case? How do you think about fundraising today? And how do you keep the momentum going? I think by and large, at least in Florida, we have not backed off of our projected goals for FY21, and we did not change any of our goals for this fiscal year. So we continue to push on and to think about how is it that we continue to share the important needs and a vision of the institution and the mission of the institution with those people who care most about it, and encourage them at this point in time more than ever to lead and to join us and to set the pace for others. And so our missions have not changed, and the need and the importance of our roles as foundations is more paramount today than it ever was.
Yeah, let's talk about that role, how the university views the foundation as a resource provider. Vita, you shared an anecdote with me the other day that I was hoping you'd share with the folks on the webinar today.
Sure, absolutely. We're a resource to the university. In this time of COVID-19, it's just brought a lot of unexpected consequences to the university. One of the things that we did in order to assist our students in graduating this year, we had a little over 100, that just could not finish paying their bills. So they had outstanding balances. And so the foundation was able to step in and clear those balances for those students. And that was a huge deal. We haven't been in a position to do that before, but we had donors that stepped up to assist us, and utilizing unrestricted funds, we were able to do that quite successfully. And that's only one of the things that we've done, in addition to establishing the Student Emergency Relief Fund. That's been very successful. We've raised almost $1 million at this point, to assist our students in direct needs that they have being off campus. One of the eye-opening things for me as a leader on campus was that the dependency of our students on the resources that we provide. And so to say, we just go back and work remotely was more of an impact that even I thought it would be. But the services that we provide on campus is such a need for our students that we're supporting them through the Student Emergency Relief Fund to get some of the resources that they now don't have access to on campus.
Peter, is that a departure from the way foundation funds have been used in the past at Delaware State?
Not really, but not on the scale. Not on the scale, that we did over the past 2-3 months. We have not been as directly involved in large quantity of funds to our students as we are now. And we're continuing to fundraise, for that. And what's interesting is that it's actually brought new donors to the university, those that really want to see the university to thrive, as we talked about, because we have such an impact on the state of Delaware's economy. So showing value to the community has really brought those donors to support the university and assist us in meeting some of the needs of our students, and also faculty and staff.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth, we'll talk about the Wichita State University and Wichita State Foundation in setting expectations, their expectations of you and your foundation, and how you responded.
Like everyone else, we immediately went into the mode of creating the Student Emergency Fund and all of those assets deploying as they come in, as well as some other funds to help with the creation of PPP, et cetera. But what we've been talking about now is that the emergency is not so emergency anymore. It is life. And 48% of our student body are first generation. Our economy in Kansas has been hit hard because we're heavily aerospace and oil, with a 22% unemployment rate as of today. And so what can we do as not only Wichita State with our students, but for our whole community? So we're still focusing on the emergency fund, but morphing it into more of a student need fund. And also looking at ways that, as our new president is pushing with us, how do we get investments in micro enterprises, in venture capital, in helping our economy through creating opportunities for our students. So lots of conversations, but we're learning how to coexist with the virus, not just treating it as an emergency.
Elizabeth, I'm going to come back to you in a moment because you mentioned your Shock the World campaign, and now you're talking about other use of donated funds, same as Vita did. I'm going to come back in a moment as we talk about donor expectations and communication and setting expectations with all the parties. But let me ask Jack the same question I asked the three of you about expectation setting with the institution. How's that communication going? Anything specific that you could offer?
Yeah, you know, the university, like I'm sure all of our institutions are facing a lot of uncertainty about tuition revenue, state funding, and they really turn to the foundation as sort of the rock, the stable force of financial support that we always have been. And there were some immediate questions, particularly in March after the market correction in March, about our endowment values and whether or not we had underwater endowments and how we would be responding to that. Could the university count on the distributions from the endowments that we had already committed to making for the upcoming fiscal year? Our board felt that in light of the market correction, they needed to meet, and we had a special meeting of the board to look at our endowment spending policy. And we looked at underwater endowments. We had very few, fortunately, and the board, the staff made a commitment to the university to fully fund the distributions from the endowments as we had promised earlier in the year. So the university is looking at the foundation in a way that gives them great comfort that that we will meet our commitments. We also have been working with some of the CFOs on the campuses, the deans, to look at unspent funds. It's a historic problem, as we all know, that sometimes people put money away for rainy days, and they were trying to uncover those rainy day funds, and we help them through we have an electronic database of all of our gift funds, both endowment funds and current funds, that we were able to share with them so they could help find those monies that were not being spent and could be used to fill budget gaps this year.
Yeah, you've raised a very important issue. I'd like to pause there for a second and remind everyone who's listening in, all of us have assets under management, whether it's 30 million or 3 billion. We have assets under management, but it's not a homogeneous fund. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of discrete funds in there. And with a little bit of diligence and a little bit of good accounting and looking around, we could possibly free up hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of current funding, in addition to keeping with the commitments from the endowed pool. Thanks, Jack. I'm sure CU administration greatly appreciates a commitment made and a commitment kept, so thank you. Elizabeth, I said I'd come back. The Shock the World campaign. When you did the Shock the World campaign, when you started, you probably weren't anticipating global pandemic and any of the other issues that have occurred, but now you are also being asked to offer some funds for immediacy, for emergency, for students. Are the donors responding?
They are, and again, we had a conversation just this morning. There are clearly donors that we know we can't talk to about a gift, but we can talk to about the impact of their prior giving and what will happen in the future. They've made it clear that their net worth has dropped substantially. And so part of our job is to see them through over those years, just like they have with us, and be supportive. And then there are others that are doing well. And again, part of our job is to figure out who are those people, where are their passions, how do they want to be supportive of their alma mater or the institution that they love so dearly, if they're from another school, and how can they meet some of the goals and priorities that we have, or maybe we need to adjust ours to fit their passions.
Have you changed, as Tom said, they haven't changed any of their goals. Have you changed any of the goals of your campaign?
Campaign, no. We've met all of the goals for our campaign. For going forward for next year, One of my colleagues did a survey of the schools in the American Conference, of which we are a part. And it was interesting that half of the institutions said they're not changing at all goals for next year. And the other half said maybe. We're a maybe. We're watching, we're talking, we're evaluating what the expectations are. And again, part of that is based on our particular donor base and the industries they represent. So we aren't going to ever go backwards. We're always looking forward, but we are looking at how we might adjust expectations for this next year.
Thanks. Vita, you mentioned that you all had discovered new donors because they do want to support these students, et cetera. Let's talk a little bit about role of philanthropy via the foundation. Do we continue to fund our margin of excellence initiatives, our strategic initiatives, or do we change our focus to immediacy? Or can you do both?
Well, actually, we need to do both. That's the position that we're taking. We're uncovering a lot of needs that the university now has as a result of the pandemic. And so how do we change the focus of our original thought that we would focus on for this year to support what the need is now, but at the same time, looking at where do we go from here? So one of the things that we're doing, is meeting with our donors and various stakeholders and those who are donors to see about repurposing their original donation, to more of an immediate need. And we're finding some success in that, because what we needed and asked for support for in the last fall of 2019 is not necessarily what we need now. And in most cases, it is not. And we're finding great success in repurposing of donor funds by working with the donor to see how they can expand their donation now and repurpose what they've already given us. So we're having great success with that. So it's really working with the administration and working with our stakeholders to see where do we want to take the university as we move out of COVID-19, whenever that will be, but we want to be ready and have the foundation in place so that we can truly thrive, as we move forward.
Yeah, and so I'm trying as we go along to offer up or reinforce a few specific takeaways that you all mentioned. We did one a moment ago with Jack, and I'll do another one based on what you and Elizabeth both said. We have a lot of donors that have given us very special gifts and asked them to be endowed or restricted to a certain purpose. And they did that in good faith, and they did it based on the strategic needs at the time. And I do think there's something to be said for going back to them and asking them, the needs have changed, the times have changed. And right now, we would like you to picket that restriction. Maybe it doesn't need to be endowed. Maybe we can spend it now. Maybe we can work together on a way to do it. And I would encourage all the viewers to think about that and not see your funds as static, see them as a very dynamic set of funds with good communication with stakeholders. We could open up a world of possibilities, as Vita and Elizabeth have said. Tom, let me, this section, let me see if you want to add any more to that, because I want to get to other constituents, but I also want to get to something that our viewers have asked about in a moment, and that's our own operations and our own vitality. We've spent a lot of time on the institution, but I want to give you a chance to think about anything else on that topic.
I don't think there's much to add, George, other than the why has not changed. Why we do what we do has not changed. The how has changed. How we do what we do has changed. And I think all of us exist to support our host institutions and what they need. The what has changed a bit. I'll just give one quick example. We have a number of our students that live around our campus, which many of you probably have the same. When we sent our students home in mid-March, those that lived on campus then were able to get refunds on their residential halls, things of that nature. Those that lived off campus, though, those apartment landlords were holding them to their leases. And so our president called me and said, Tom, you know most of these people who own all these apartments around the campus. Can you get your foundation board together and pull them to see if we can work out some kind of arrangement that whatever policy we set at the university, that they would mirror that policy. And so our foundation board then took the lead and brought those community leaders together. And thankfully, they adopted the university's policy. That's a role we've never played before. That said, I would say then also 2 or 3 other quick things. I think how we raise the money is a very interesting dynamic. If you look at our tracking mechanisms of when we think gifts are going to come in during the course of the year, the pool is very large just before the end of the calendar year, and the pool is very large just before the end of the fiscal year. So it tells us a bit that time frame of those 2 key inflection points are absolutely critical. Interesting enough, when the pandemic hit, we went to a platform of only focusing on 5 prospects or donors. We went to a platform of win the day, what could you do that day to take action? And we started reporting out on what we called 2-week sprints. And all of our development officers then reported out with regularity and a rhythm and a cadence. And it's interesting then to see those bands that balloon out in normal December and June. Those bands started to fill in every week and every 2 weeks. So it forced the issue a bit of that sense of urgency with donors. And it put them into bands and gave our fundraisers immediate rewards that donors were responding to that kind of a strategy. The only issue that we have kind of come up with that really is troubling for us is we have a lot of capital projects. And many of our capital projects right now are driven heavily by private support. And when those capital projects are paused for any reason, the costs of those projects typically go up. And so when we started getting lead gifts for these projects many years ago, the budget was very different than it is now today. And so the dynamic of stewardship with capital project donors and managing that process right now is a pretty challenging dynamic, because we have some donors then that said, well, that's not the deal. The deal I had was the budget was this, and we're going to move forward. Maybe we want to reallocate our funds to something else right now. And so we're going through that process right now with a lot of our donors.
Let me ask a quick question, lightning round question. I'm going to ask 2 lightning round questions. Elizabeth, has the university, your new president, or anybody at the university said to you, hey, we don't want you raising money for that anymore. We want you raising money for current operations?
No.
Vita, same
No.
question.
No.
Jack?
Nope, it's business as usual.
So the university, Tom, and Gainesville didn't say, hey, hold on those capital projects. We need current funds. Forget those capital projects.
No, we put a pause on some of the projects that we were working on and reprioritized those projects a bit, but we have a lot of them. I mean, just to give you the scope of this, we have 32 capital projects in process right now, and the total amount of those is about $1.7 billion. And of those 32, 29 of those have private gifts in them.
Yeah. Thank you. So I said, let's segue now. Let's transition rather, from our very large constituent stakeholder being the institution. The institution, as Tom said, that all of our foundations were created to support the institution. That's why we have institutionally related foundations in the first place. Let's talk a little bit about our own vitality. So there's an adage, it's not an adage, if you go on an airplane ride, I haven't been on one in a while, but I distinctly remember the flight attendant telling me if I'm traveling with a companion, particularly a child, put my own mask on first before I attend to the child. I always thought that seems counterintuitive. Then I realized the reason I need to do that is I have to be healthy. I have to be vital to take care of my dependent. And I feel that way about the foundation. That sometimes we need to think about putting our own mask on first, because if we're not vital, if we're not getting our lifeblood, we cannot help the institution that depends on us. So let's talk a little bit about our own situations operationally. I'm going to set the stage by asking each of you, don't tell us how much money from each of the sources. Just give us a sense, starting with you, Vita. What are your sources of funding for the foundation by category? How do you fund your own operations?
Sure. Well, our funding is heavily weighted towards corporations and foundations. And then our alumni. Our alumni, fortunately, is 50% of our donor base. I'm quite proud of that. That's unusual in a lot of schools of our size, but it's really fantastic for us. Now, of the alumni participation of the alumni, lower, but of our donor base, it's over 50%. So I'm really excited about that. In regards to individuals, we have a lot of new friends to Delaware State University, and these are individuals that are community. They're not alumni, they're not, faculty or staff, but they're individuals in the state of Delaware that are choosing to support the university, and that's why our student population is growing, and all because we're communicating and engaging the community in a much greater effort than we have in the past. So that's really where our funds are coming from, the individuals, friends, corporations, foundations, the alumni base, just primarily, where we're getting our sourcing.
So is there when these gifts come in, does the foundation take a fee on those gifts to fund operations?
Well, and I know it's unusual among this team, but we haven't started that yet, but that is something that we will be instituting this fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts on July 1. We will be instituting that, but we've just been slow about going there because of the constituency that we serve and primarily the profile of our donor base. But we will be instituting that because of reasons that we all know, to operate and to replenish our unrestricted funds, in a more direct way.
Was that a decision made before the COVID-19 crisis?
It's one that we've been contemplating for quite a while, because I attend, the AGB conference, the forum in January, I believe it was, and it's unbelievable. It was just 4 months ago. And then we were all not social distancing at all. We were going to dinners and we were quite close and sharing best practices and all of these great things. And most of the people I spoke with there, have that in place. And I said, okay, it's time for us to start seeing this is not unusual for foundations to do, and to start, cultivating our donor base, to be accepting of this fee. So.
I heard from someone in January that they go to the forum because it's the only convention they go to where there's more hugs than handshakes. And I got to thinking there's something to be said for that. Elizabeth, how do you fund your operations? What's the sources or source of those funds?
So the largest source is a 1.65% administrative fee. When we started our campaign,
on your endowment. 1.65 against your endowment.
Yeah. Okay. And then when we started the campaign, so 7 years ago, we started a 5% fee on all gifts. So that's our second largest source. And then the rest of it's not large amounts, but all members of our National Advisory Council, which is 105 people, they all must give an unrestricted gift of at least $1,000. And then, as I mentioned earlier, about 1% of our budget is a contract with the university.
Okay. Is any of those sources under pressure right now? Do you see any of those sources eroding as you enter the next fiscal year?
Well, we do a 20-quarter rolling average on our endowment, and our endowment is a bit stressed. We're dropping off 4 quarters that are positive and picking up most likely a year that is in negative territory. And then our administrative fee being our largest source of income, with our endowment being down, that's the reason why we are taking a cut. Now we are, like Jack said, we draw down from our earnings on our current funds, and we just are planning to draw down a little bit more from there because we don't want to take a significant budget hit, because we need to continue to invest in our people, and we're not cutting any positions at this point.
And you are, yeah, you are largely funded by, you all are all employees of the foundation, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's your budget, it's your operations. Got it.
And there is some comfort in that because we create our own destiny. It's difficult when we look at other universities that get so much from the university, but they're also, it's both. And this is our hand, and this is how we'll play it.
Well, it cuts both ways. I mean, I had the privilege of being CEO at two completely different foundations, at two completely different institutions. And my first foray, we were 100% autonomous, legally, financially. We didn't receive one dime from the Naval Academy or from the federal government or the Department of the Navy. And I enjoyed autonomy. I liked it. But it puts pressure on you. If you don't hunt, you don't eat. We were very dependent on unrestricted giving. Yeah, we had gift fees, and yeah, we had a very modest assessment of the endowment. And then at the other institution, everybody except me was basically an employee of the university. And what we used the foundation funds for was to subsidize development. And also subsidize some key executives on campus. So if foundation operations were a certain dollar amount, you couldn't steal from those other things. So I've had it both ways, and I would say, yeah, it's nice to be in that interdependent, get money from the university until the state government intervenes, and then everybody gets a budget cut. So I don't think there's any panacea. I think each of us have to operate with the means in which we have. Jack, what's the sources of, you mentioned your 1.5 on your endowment. Any other sources of operational funding?
You know, it's that assessment on the endowments, and then we do take a monthly draw, a 3% draw on our cash balances. And because we don't do the fundraising, we generate a lot of money through those two sources. We keep what we need to operate the foundation. I have about 20 employees at the foundation. We do all of the gift administration, the gift processing, the finance and accounting, we work with our OCIO, and we send the bulk of that revenue to the university, and they use that to fund their advancement operations, along with a contribution from the system and then the campuses. And right now, our funding is stable and growing. The system money is also stable. It's the campus piece of those operations that are in jeopardy and probably will be cut. So we have an overall CU advancement operating budget of about $58 million, which includes the foundation and the 4 campus advancement operations. Probably will see some cuts of several $1 million to that overall budget.
Okay, thanks. Tom, anything to add there?
The same. Yeah, we have 7 funding sources, and it's all our own budget, so we just manage them. We have a management fee on the endowment, as everyone's talked about. We have what we call a development investment fee. It's a little bit nicer word to use maybe than a gift tax. We have the income off of the non-endowed funds. We have college and unit investments because we invest about half of our resources in their operations, but we have MOUs with them. So they make investments with us in a collaborative fashion. We have a small amount from the university with a MOU that we work with them. And then an interesting one that we put into place 6 or 7 years ago was vanity license plates, gator plates, and that generates about $2.5 to $3 million a year for us on an annual basis. It helps fund our program. And all of those, George, when you mentioned how many of those are under stress, all of them are.
Thanks to all of you for covering that, because I did want to give everybody a sense of the various sources of operating income that we all tend to deal with. And Vita, to your point, all of our foundations are trying to find the right balance of gift fee vis-a-vis an endowment fee, vis-a-vis drawing down on your non-endowed restricted funds. There's multiple sources there, and then multiple balances of doing that, particularly with your donors. Let's change kind of our direction now. We've talked about this large stakeholder of the institution and various ways of supporting it. We talked a little bit about our donors and communicating with them and asking them to do some things in the short term that we didn't anticipate asking them. We've talked a little bit about our own vitality, but let's start looking forward now as best we can. I'm interested in hearing from each of you, and I think the viewers are too. What conversations are you having with your own board or your board chair? Are you having conversations about doing things differently, or a different structure, or different goals, or hey, we just got to get through the next 4 months or 6 months and then we'll worry about the next fiscal year? Could each of you chat a little bit about what you're able to share in that regard as navigators? We're navigating in this sea of ambiguity. We hope we've been through some of the absolute worst over these last 3 months or so. We don't know exactly what's out there in the intermediate and far future, but as Tom said, we still got to operate. We still have to be available to the university. So Jack, I'm going to start with you on this. What are you having talks with your board chair about?
You know, we're talking a lot about donor stewardship, which includes, of course, the board itself. We have two boards. We have a fiduciary board, and then we have a much larger 150 person board that we gather quarterly here in Colorado in person for a 2-day conference, cocktails, dinners, education opportunities, really a great stewardship opportunity. And the foundation organizes that, puts that on, and we were, you know, we had to cancel the one we were scheduled in May. We've got another one in August, also canceled the in-person. But what we did is we have a great team of event professionals who helped us reinvent that. And we had that meeting after all, but we had it virtually. We had a Zoom cocktail party on a Thursday night where we were able to break people out into breakout rooms randomly so that people got to visit. We sent out cocktail recipes ahead of time, president's favorite recipe, my favorite recipe. And then on the Friday, when we normally would have been on our Colorado Springs campus, we put together some videos about what was going on that campus. We had the chancellor of that campus speak. The president of the university spoke. I spoke. We gave investment updates. We gave updates on fundraising opportunities. We did a deep dive into our cybersecurity program. And the thing that happened was we have people from all over the country, even some international members of that board, who only usually get to come once or twice a year. Everybody was able to participate because they could do it from their own living room. And so we had a much greater attendance, just had such great feedback. So it's a silver lining. It's really something we didn't expect. And so we're now planning. We've got some tweaks to it for August, but people are very excited about being able to participate in a different way.
Yeah, thanks again for a very specific example of something you and your board are doing and trying to make some lemonade out of this, out of these lemons that we've been dealt. Let me change up the order. Vita, what are you and your board talking about?
Well, our meeting is not till the end of June. However, at that meeting, you know, which will be virtual, we will be discussing, primarily it's going to focus on how we're going to reopen school. That's going to be a heavy part of our discussion. And we'll try to make it fun, but there's a lot of things that we have to consider, you know, at our institution. And while it's well underway, you know, as far as various scenarios, but we will be taking a deep dive into that and to see how do we parallel the support from the foundation to fill any gaps in being able to support any one recommendation over the other on how we can reopen. So that's going to, you know, a lot of not fun stuff, but important things that we will have to address at our meeting. in June. So I'll have to pick up from Jack and see if I can make it more fun, you know. So maybe some virtual cocktails and send the things in the mail, you know, to
Get that recipe. Get his recipe for whatever cocktail.
That's right.
Get his old-fashioned recipe. What bourbon do you use, Jack?
I used rye whiskey. It was a rye.
All right, so you're a rye man. Hey, Tom, you were talking to us the other day when we were chatting amongst ourselves about looking around the corner or looking over the horizon. I know you and your board like doing those kinds of exercises. Is this the time to do that?
Yeah, the university, when moving students off of the campus and thinking about all the defensive mechanisms, thankfully, we also convinced our president to play offense, and he formulated a task force of reimagining the university post-COVID. And so I serve on that task force, and then I distribute the notes of those meetings to our foundation board. And so the foundation board now is focusing on how we might reimagine the foundation in concert then to our host institution, to be sure that we're prepared, that as the institution moves down the road and around the corner, that we're prepared to be a good partner with them. So we've now put together on the defensive side, in concert with our board, we put together the return plan, and our return plan was approved last week of all the components of that. And so now we're shifting to the reimagine team, and we're putting together then the reimagine of what it might look like on the people side, on our employees. So to give you an example, we had less than 10% of our entire team was working some kind of hybrid model prior to COVID. And we think that as much as 25% of our team will work remotely permanently now, and as much as 50% will work in a hybrid manner, and probably less than 25% will be kind of what we call residential people who work full-time from their university office. And so the framework of that and how that might work, and then how do you then lead, and how do you manage, and how do you perform in that model? And in order to do that, then we're giving a lot of thought then to the infrastructure that has to be in place to do that, because place now probably is not going to matter as much, but people, infrastructure, and then innovative programs that you're going to launch to respond to your host institution is really going to be the key as you look down the road and around the corner.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, you think about the nuances of how we in advancement and how we traditionally in foundation operate. And many of us had remote employees, particularly those of you that have multiple campuses to support. But then you have this other aspect, I call it the white space on the org chart, the stuff that isn't there that happens just because human beings interact, and out of that comes sudden burst of innovation. You have this opportunity to do something. I hope we don't lose that, but you guys have inspired me with some of the things you're doing already remotely and via this kind of a medium, including having fun, that many of us would probably give consideration to. Elizabeth, how about you at Wichita State? Are you having conversations about the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? Anything you're thinking about doing differently?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, there's that expression that you should never waste a good crisis.
I love that expression.
It is time. It is an opportunity to look at what has been going well. Where do you need to staff up? Where do you need to perhaps make some changes? And who may be happier in another position or elsewhere? It is a time to talk about all of that. And like Jack, we had our national meeting in April virtually, but we didn't share recipes. So I've gotten my one big takeaway for the day. But it was one of our most successful because those out of town who sometimes don't make it back loved the opportunity to be engaged that way. Like Tom, we are also talking extensively about what is the new normal. A year ago, we were not saying that Zoom is in person. Now Zoom feels very in person. A year ago, we were not as strong in how we handled meaningful contacts. And I believe we're much better today and will continue to be. And a year ago, we were not as strong in talking about the use of video in working with our donors. And now that is a constant conversation. So there's a lot of opportunity to engage with our donors as we go forward under this new paradigm.
You know, I do love the phrase, never waste a good crisis. And the reason I say it isn't to be flippant. It's that we can learn so much. So, you know, think about what we learned in 08, 09 that many of us have then said later, you know, I can rely on that. I know more about endowment management today because of what I learned in 08, 09. And I thought I knew a lot from 01, 02, but 08, 09 was different. What's different today, though, is it isn't just a financial crisis. It isn't just a credit crisis. It isn't just a failing of the banks and mortgages. It's a social crisis. It's a human crisis. It's really weighing on our teams. Our presidents who are trying to decide, do I want to bring 10,000 students back to campus and put them in residence halls? And yet at the foundation, we have the opportunity maybe to be the anchor to windward, to keep my navigating process going forward. Hey, if we have this anchor to windward, something we can depend on, something we can look to, somebody who's there consistently for us, I think there's a lot of value we can add. The other aspect of never waste a good crisis is our relationship to the institution. One of you mentioned MOUs previously. So this is a lightning round question. Vita, and you only get to say, you only get to answer, you can't, no context. Vita, okay. Would you say your foundation's relationship with Delaware State today is better than it was in December, not as good as it was in December, or the same as it was in December?
The same.
Same. Tom, same question.
Better.
Better. Jack, same question.
Better.
Better. Elizabeth?
The same.
Same. Those that answered same, does it mean that this drew you, you already had a strong relationship and therefore you were prepared for this? Elizabeth, all right, both of you are nodding. Those of you are saying better, took advantage of this and said this is a time to come together and demonstrate how strong and relevant we are to the university?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a new level of excellence, George. I think it's a new level of a shared vision type of thing. So we're moving on to next, and whatever that next looks like, we're there together with them.
Yeah, thank you. You guys all model the way as leaders, and I really greatly appreciate it. We've got about 6 minutes remaining. And the only question we've had, and I'll ask it quickly, of what's the gift fees at the University of Florida, Tom? Do you have fees on all your gifts?
5%.
5%. So the question is,
5%.
Do you have donors asking you to waive those gift fees, or deans asking you to waive those gift fees, so that theoretically the gift goes further?
Yeah, we have requests every day, but we have a policy that we don't waive them, and somebody pays. And so we just negotiate it either with the donor or the dean or the university or wherever, but there's a cost to do business. And at the end of the day, if we modify that cost, then you modify the quality. And there's the only challenge that you run into is some very large foundations and some personal foundations, family foundations now have written policies that they will not pay.
Right.
And so when we receive the letter from them that indicates that they cannot and won't pay them, then that's a negotiation that we have within our organization. Typically, we do a third, and third. The university will pick up a third, the college will pick up a third, and we pay a third of the fee, so it's paid.
Okay, thanks. So to the viewer who sent that in, thank you. And there's a tactic that you may want to consider when you get those requests for waiving your fees, which are part of your policy. So remember why it's called policy as opposed to practice. All right, here's how I'd like to end before Tiffany comes back on. I'd like each of you just to offer our viewers something in the category of your hard-won wisdom to help all of us, to inspire all of us to continue to navigate and prevail going further. Jack, would you like to start?
Sure. You know, I'm an old school kind of guy, and I was always very skeptical about remote work. And I have learned to trust my staff and trust new ways of doing business. And I've realized that I was wrong, that you can be just as productive, maybe even more so, in a remote work situation. So I feel like I've learned a really important lesson.
This old school guy appreciates that from another old school guy. Thank you, Jack. Elizabeth, what would you offer to the folks out there?
I think the most important for me over the last months has been to stay very positive and be a strong communicator. And by being a strong communicator, I'm talking about with campus colleagues, really talking through what payouts will be going forward and getting through that together. And with our staff to talk through, we're going to do everything we can to protect jobs because they're our most important investment. So just staying positive and almost over communicate.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So it's three things: communicate, communicate, communicate. Okay, thanks. Vita?
Yes, I could say ditto to what Elizabeth just stated, you know, because staying positive is key because everyone's concerned. A lot of people are fearful about what the future is going to hold. So as advancement leaders, we have to be that beacon. You know, we have to show that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, the train, whichever, you know, version you want to say of that, you know, that there is hope at the end and that if we work together, staying engaged with our stakeholders, so that we can get through this. But our positivity is going to feed others to be positive, right? As we move forward, you know, with this new normal, as people, the new phrase is, you know, so that's what I would suggest. And just continue to show pride in your university, you know, as opposed to, oh, well, it's with us, you know, we're losing money, whatever it may be. Let's stay on the high road about it and continue to show that positivity, to Elizabeth's word, really, and being that example for others to follow.
Okay, Tom, you heard from your three colleagues. What's your pithy, hard-won wisdom comments for our viewers?
Mine are the 4 L's, George. Lean in, launch, learn, and laugh. So as you confront these challenges, lean into them. Launch ideas. Don't wait around because the next day something's going to happen. So don't wait around. Just launch it and learn. And when you learn, then change your path. And make sure you maintain your sense of humor along the way because this is going to be a rocky road as we move forward. Just lean into it, launch, learn, and laugh.
Well, look, thanks to all 4 of you. I'm going to turn it back to Tiffany, but let me say this. When we're looking for role model leadership, you 4 modeled the way for all of us. And I, for one, greatly appreciate it. You've all inspired me today and reminded me, yes, life goes on and there's something out there. So let's learn, let's love, let's laugh, let's leave a legacy. Thanks so much. Tiffany, back to you.
Thanks, George, and thanks, Vita, Tom, Elizabeth, and Jack. What a great session. I hope the participants appreciated some of the insights. I wanted to share a couple of upcoming events that AGB is offering. We actually are offering peer-to-peer conversations. They're actually for your board chairs, so they can talk amongst themselves, as well as a series of webinars. And of course, later next month will be one specific to the foundation and focusing entirely on sort of endowment and endowment governance. So thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the participants. If there's ever any questions you have for the panelists or for myself, I encourage you to email me and be in touch. And I look forward to one day seeing you all in person. And stay safe and be happy.
Thank you.
Thanks.